Hi, I'm Emille Reid, infectious diseases physician and HIV clinician. Today is World AIDS Day and I'm going to speak to some amazing people, long-term HIV survivors, sharing with us their inspirational stories.
Good day, Dorian.
Good day, Emille.
Fantastic to see you. Great to have a chat with you.
Yes, it's good to be here, and I think on the eve of World AIDS Day, it is important that as HIV positive individuals that we reflect on where we've come from the last 40 years and really envision where we want to go to for the next few years ahead.
Agree 100%. Dorian, tell us more about the Red Ribbon Foundation.
The Red Ribbon Foundation really, the concept came about when I was diagnosed HIV positive about 16 years ago. And the concept came about because I wanted to do good after the sexual assault which resulted in my diagnosis. And I didn't find anyone that really was like me at that stage. I didn't find anyone that I could look towards for support and that would actually understand what it meant in those times to be a gay individual but also be HIV positive at the same time. And when I started the Red Ribbon Foundation, it really started to create a platform for HIV positive individuals, first of all, to be celebrated, and then also to provide the necessary support, education and awareness, which I didn't find at the time of my diagnosis.
Amazing story. I've been following the Red Ribbon Foundation for a few years now. I know what you guys have been up to, what you personally been doing, and I've heard a rumor that you're currently busy to develop this special 2022 calendar. How did this whole idea come about, and what is the purpose of this calendar?
The idea came about, I had celebrated 15 years of living with HIV last year on the 5th of December, and I couldn't really celebrate it with anyone because it was COVID. We were in the midst of the COVID epidemic, and it was this year when one of our fellow HIV activists, Shane, passed away very suddenly from a heart attack. And I felt that his legacy and his life was not memorialized enough and not celebrated enough. And yes, you know, COVID is here and maybe it prevented us from doing what we normally would have done. But I just felt that I wasn't going to allow another friend of mine to pass away without me celebrating them. And so I gathered 12 of my friends and 12 people who really, on my journey, I have been able to look towards. Some of them I haven't even met, you know, but these were individuals that have pioneered the way for me. And I thought of the calendar in a way that I could every day remind myself that these people I am because of them. And I think that was the most important thing for me when I thought up the concept of a 2022 Love Beyond HIV/AIDS calendar.
Amazing. I actually hope that 2022 will be the first, but definitely not the last of these calendars, because there's a lot of things to celebrate with a lot of people living with HIV and having a normal life. As where people think it's not possible, you and I and many others know it is possible indeed.
Indeed, it is possible. I'm sitting here 16 years later. I think, I was writing down something the other day, and I said to myself, what would I tell myself, the 22-year-old, what would I tell that person? And I think I would tell that person, it is going to be okay. And it's probably the next 16 years is going to be the best part of your life. I think when my diagnosis happened, life really started for me.
Very important. I think what people frequently think when they get tested and found to be HIV positive, that this is the end. We know it's only the beginning.
It's only the beginning. And with this calendar, I hope that many young people would actually find hope in the fact that there are Tonis that have survived 31 years. There's Barbara Kingsleys that have survived more than 20 years. There's Fahmida Millers that have survived 27 years. And the list goes on. And I think that, we don't celebrate our long-term survivors of this virus enough. And so I'm hoping that somehow this calendar will create that awareness and really renew the face of HIV?
Absolutely. HIV, for many people, have been a niche disease to many clinicians. It's been a subspecialty of infectious diseases. From a scientific point of view, the important thing that we're even looking at is HIV as a geriatric disease, because many of us are taking care of patients who are in their 80s, in their 90s, living with HIV. Dorian, thank you for your time, and I actually hope to speak to some of the special people you have just mentioned.
Thank you, Emille.
We're going to continue in speaking to one of those legends that Dorian referred to earlier. Her name is Barbara Kingsley. Barbara, very welcome.
Thank you, Emille. Wonderful to be here.
Barbara, tell me, please take me back to that day when you were diagnosed, the way you felt, what you thought, and how did we get to 2021, so many years later?
I don't know. The day I was diagnosed was the 29th of December 2000. It's a day that I will never forget as long as I live, and I was absolutely devastated. In as much as I know that HIV happens to people, I always believed that it was something that would happen to somebody else, and never in a million years did I ever believe that this would happen to me. When the doctor told me, I'll never forget her words, she said to me, "Barbara, it's positive, I'm so sorry." And I looked at her and I couldn't comprehend. I couldn't understand why she was saying this to me. I couldn't understand why she was lying to me when it couldn't possibly be true. I was absolutely devastated.
Wow. And tell me, after that, when you decided this is not the end, but the beginning, what happened in your mind to transform that negative result or message that you received into what we see today?
Emille, it was a long journey. It's not something that happened overnight. As much as I believe that I was educated on HIV, I really wasn't. It took me 8 years to come to a place of acceptance. Remember, when I was diagnosed in 2000, I didn't know that there was treatment available to me. In those days, they never put you on treatment until your CD4 dropped to 200 and thereafter 350. So even if I wanted the treatment, firstly, it wasn't available to me, and secondly, I couldn't afford it. There was no Facebook. I didn't know of anybody else at that time who was living with HIV, and all of those who I knew of that had HIV had already died. So I went into full-blown denial for a period of 8 years. I pretended, I call it what I call it superficial acceptance. So I accepted it on a very superficial level only, so long as I didn't need to think about it too much. I never went for blood tests because I was afraid, and blood tests only show documentary proof that the virus was progressing in my body, and I couldn't handle that. So I went into a complete head in the sand mentality, and I shut it out for 8 years until I could no longer deny it when I started to get ill. Towards the end of 2007, my CD4 counts dropped dramatically. I started getting sores all over my body, exhaustion, headaches, aching legs. I started to drop weight, and eventually by 2008 I could no longer work because I was so ill. And my CD4, without me knowing, had eventually dropped to just 86. I was devastated. I think it was worse than the initial diagnosis 8 years later, or 8 years previously rather, because it's like my worst nightmare had come true. And I honestly believed that I was going to die. It was then I was forced to commence ARV treatment. The first set of treatment did not work for me. In fact, it made me so ill that I ended up in hospital. 2 weeks later, I began a new regime, which did work for me. And within a very short period of time, my life began to transform. My health slowly started coming back. My energy gradually returned, and that was the turning point. That was one of the most remarkable transformations of my entire life. It is there that I found my strength, and it is that person that you see sitting here today.
Wow. Tell me, Barbara, if you can speak to anybody who is currently sitting with their doctor discussing their blood results, they just received that positive blood test results, they are busy discussing the CD4 virus load and everything else. If you can actually sit in during that conversation and tell that individual something, what would that be?
Do not underestimate the power of antiretroviral drugs. HIV left untreated is deadly. HIV treated with ARVs from diagnosis cannot harm us.
That is a fantastic testimony of somebody who's been living with HIV for so many years. Barbara is indeed a legend. Barbara is indeed an example to many people out there. Barbara, thank you very much for giving me your time today, sharing your story with us, and I am sure that it will make a massive impact on many youngsters out there.
Thank you very much.
The next person I'm going to talk to, I met a few years back, and while waiting to record an episode for a TV program, I sat there and listened to her story. That story inspired me so much, hence the reason for this to be such an honor to have her here today. Toni Zimmermann, very welcome.
Thank you, so nice to see you again.
And so amazing to see you. I know your story. What an inspiration. It touched me in so many ways, and I think that is why it's so amazing to have you here today. So you've been living with HIV for more than 30 years, if I recall it correctly. And I mean, really, that is older than some of the children that's living around us. So just give us snippets out of the last 31 years and share it with people who actually do not have any insight or understanding of what it is to live with HIV.
It's going to have to be snippets. It's so difficult to put 31 years into such a short space of time. Well, I grew up as an Afrikaans dominee's daughter, and you know what, as you grow up in life, there's always issues. You know, people grow up differently, and then things start to happen. And I remember hearing about HIV and AIDS in the news. It was these hectic stories those years. And in 1990, I was 22 years old when one day I got a phone call from my doctor who said, "Did you know your boyfriend tested positive for HIV?" And I can't even begin to describe the ice cold feeling I had at that moment. In 1990, I had to wait 2 weeks for my test results. 2 weeks of hell. These days you can have it within 20 minutes. But it was 2 weeks of hell, and praying and hoping, and then it still tested positive. But I've always been a survivor, and I don't actually even want to call myself a survivor, because I got here today where I am, one day at a time. And I have lived every day as much as I possibly can. A lot of things have happened. Shortly after I tested HIV positive, I also found out that I was pregnant. And that was a difficult time too. The doctor never sent me for counseling. In fact, the day he told me I was pregnant, he gave me a piece of paper and said, "Go for an abortion." No information. I am the kind of person who likes information. I've always loved learning, and I want to know what is happening with my body. And I remember in one of the newspapers at the time, there was a little advert from ATIC. That was the organization those years that gave counseling and things, and I called and for the first time met someone who knew something about HIV and AIDS. I was also very fortunate to very shortly after that be introduced to a support group, and I think meeting other people with HIV was my saving grace. It was just amazing to see that by then already there were people that was living with it for longer than I am, and there was not even medication those days. Just to meet other people that went through it. I think my life happened in stages of 10 years from then on. So by the time I was 32, my son started to get sick, and in 1999, he passed away. And for me, that has always been the worst day. HIV can never, ever, ever be as hard as losing a child. And from then on, that is also, I couldn't live with HIV as the worst thing anymore. I also remember talking to my HIV in the beginning days, because we didn't have medications. We had to find our own ways of dealing with it. And there was a lot of people trying out things. Then people wanted to eat this diet and that diet. I've never been a diet kind of a person, you can see it. I like to enjoy my life. And I decided from the beginning, I remember one day saying to this virus, "You live as long as I do." And from there on, that's how we lived. We lived as a unity, and this virus is still living as long as I do. When my son passed away, I needed a change. I was living in KwaZulu-Natal at the time, and I moved to Cape Town. And here also, I wouldn't be here today where I am if it wasn't for the HIV. It guided me and got towards places all my life. And even after my son passed away, guiding me to get to Cape Town was the right thing to do, because within 6 months of arriving in Cape Town, I got chickenpox. I went to see a doctor, and she said, "Did you know they're starting drug trials at Tygerberg Hospital?" And that's how I started my journey with ARVs at the end of 2000. I've lived without medications for 10 years, but I was also showing signs that it is time to take ARVs. And it changed my life completely. From then on, it just got better and better. The viral load, the CD4 counts, all changed. My viral load has been undetectable for almost 20 years now. My CD4 count has been over 1,000 for longer than 10 years. I live life as normal as I possibly can. In fact, my boss often jokes in the office to say that I'm probably healthier than most anyone in the office. Yeah, so it's difficult to just pinpoint one specific thing. I've had to deal with coming to making peace with religion. Growing up in the church was hard, and I did that. I have come to make peace with myself. I think often you blame yourself when you hear you've got HIV. You've put yourself in that situation. The thing is, life happens the way it does, and there's nothing you can do about it. What you do have is choice and knowledge, and what you do with choice and knowledge is what takes you forward. And without that, I wouldn't be alive today.
Wow. Toni, what makes you tick? What is your logo that you live by? What makes you get up in the morning, take your medication, live life to its fullest? What is that one thing that makes you tick?
That's like $1 million question. My key word in life at this moment of my life, because things change from time to time, is love. I think the world needs love and hope, and just unconditional love. People go through so many hard things, and for me, love is energy, and I shine my energy wherever I go. And I just love. I love people, I love life, I love the world the way it is.
Despite what hand you were dealt, you continue to live life, you continue to live love, and you continue to give. If I can ask you, if you had a choice to change anything that have happened in the last 30 years, what would that one thing be?
Nothing. I wouldn't be who I am if I changed anything. And I had to learn to grow and accept myself the way I am. I know that people would say, why wouldn't you choose even to go back to having your son alive? We're not in charge of what happens. And even if I could answer that question, it's not going to change anything. So I am who I am, and I love the way I am at this stage of my life because of the experiences that I've had.
Amazing. And that is the main reason why we should celebrate people like Toni, like Barbara, like Dorian. Live life, celebrate life, and love life. And the one thing we need to go out and do is to rock that red ribbon.
HIV has not weakened me. In fact, HIV has made me stronger than what I ever imagined I could be. To me, the epitome of strength is taking an obstacle and turning it into stepping stones. HIV does not have the power to take anything away from us, so go out and live your dreams.
You know what, I know that life is hard sometimes, and when you hear your own positive diagnosis, it probably feels like the end of the world. But just because life is hard doesn't make it impossible. So I am rocking my red ribbon for you, sending it with lots and lots of love. You will get through this.
So this World AIDS Day, let us rock our red ribbon and really celebrate, you know, those HIV activists and legends. And from my red ribbon to yours, have a blessed and happy World AIDS Day.